Hey, George, we're going live. Who do you want to do a shout out to?
Oh wow, who do I want to do a shout out to? I had three people. My wonderful son who's celebrating Rosh Hashanah with his beautiful family, my beautiful daughter who's going to be married next week, and of course my beloved Tracy, who I hope will be able to see this. Hi, hon.
I love that. Sons, daughters, and wives. Here we go. Hey guys, once again, we've got another amazing guest. We've got George Peter Kansas on the show today. He is a modern day mystic, a reflector, and spiritual igniter. George is a stand for the messengers of the world, so I'm excited to talk to him about that. He creates space for finding one's voice and inspiring your full soul purpose. He's a two-time cancer survivor, author of 9 books, a former lawyer, and a dad. Um, he works with, and I've been asking him about this either, some of America's most talented rock stars, difference makers, and leaders. He's shared the marquee with inspirational guests like Zig Ziglar, Dennis Waitley, and Brian Tracy. George, welcome to the show. I am super excited to keep talking with you. How about that?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I love what we do. You and I talked behind the scenes, backstage, some, and I just am fascinated to talk with you because you've got this wisdom thing going on. I'm like, yes, destiny teacher right there. Love that.
Thank you.
um, I want to talk about words because you are someone who has taken words and you actually honed them and believe that words can change our lives, do change our lives, and can make us better people. So, how do you do that? Tell me about words.
Oh yeah. Well, from working on and understanding human communications for my entire career, really, I know that we are the sum total of all the conversations we've ever participated in or been subject to since the day, even the days before we were born. And I, so I'm curious about that. I'm curious. I'm passionate about exploring how the words we choose, the thoughts we think, and the feelings we feel and allow to take hold in our body can actually influence what happens in our body. And we know, for instance, like it's no mystery. We've been studying sports performance for decades and decades. And I used to work with NFL football players and amateur golfers and fighters and sharpshooters. And we know it's not even a stretch to suggest that somebody's mindset influences their performance in a sports situation. Like that's
Okay.
we just know that we accept this as true. And so when I was diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia 18 years ago, I sort of assumed that the same would be true about what's going on in my body. And I acted accordingly. I meditated and prayed and I wrote and I journaled and I really chose the words carefully. I have a thing we share with new cancer patients. We call it the page 82 download. And it basically, it's page 82 in my book, I Cancer. And it basically says, look, I'm choosing to heal. This room is a sacred space. If you're going to be in this room with me, you must adhere to certain communication standards. And I basically explain what they can say and what they can't say. And I
You're
enforce
talking
that.
about guests that come into the room.
Guests that came into my room, my medical team, I threw a doctor out of my room because he was trying to put doubt in my mind about a particular diagnosis. And I was not at all interested in hearing about doubt. I wanted that, just to be clear, I wanted that debate and that dialogue and that inquiry to go on. I just it was not to go on around me
Gotcha.
because my confidence in that moment, I mean, we really jumped right into this, but my confidence in that moment was all I had to hold on to. And so, yeah. And of course, since then, having spoken with and worked with literally tens of thousands of cancer patients and survivors, in addition to athletes and performing artists and executives and all sorts of people, it's true. And the cool thing is, once we get develop the skills and the habits of this, what we call conscious communications with self and others, once we get those tools and start to practice them and really embody them in any area, whether it's in relationship or in money or professional exploration or physical well-being, if we once we concentrate on using those tools in any one of these areas, all of the areas start to see benefits. And
There's something I have to ask you, and
yeah,
if I can ever mind meld enough to understand how this works, I want to know how is it that you get from the point of just saying the words to believing the words. You know what I mean?
I do. That's a great question. And there's there's the simple sort of platitudinal answer, which is practice, 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 you know. And then there's actually a scientific answer. We actually know more about the mechanics of this today than we ever have, and certainly more than even 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. The neuroscience of this is extraordinary and grow and expanding by leaps and bounds every day. That we know, for instance, that from 0 to 7, when we're children, our nervous systems are like blank hard drives. They're just recording information all the time. And if that recorded information gets repeated often enough, or happens or gets recorded in um, powerfully enough, like in the case of a trauma or something, then that that stimulus becomes a belief, and our response to that stimulus becomes habitualized, becomes a habit, and we kind of get addicted to being who we are. Now, which is why it's so important that there's so much grace and understanding for people when they're like, "Oh, I'm really trying to break this habit." Yeah, it's hard to break a habit. Like you can walk into any rehab center and you can see how hard it is to break a habit. So if and it's just as true for um, endorphin addiction as it is for an opioid or another addiction. Maybe not just as true. Well, I want to be
Yeah.
sensitive to addiction, but it's really true that these we experience as hard wiring. Now that's good news in my opinion. I tell people we're not broken; we're just conditioned. And if we can understand some of the mechanics of that conditioning, we can actually, through discipline and practice and support and community and encouragement and all this stuff, um, we can actually learn to play with those mechanics and change the beliefs. If we change those beliefs with language and practice and embodiment, we can change we can change who we are. We can change who we show up as. And my feeling is that we actually begin to show up more as our real selves and less as the conditioned self, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I'm just wondering, like, you and I talked a little bit about that conditioning and how children come up and they don't have a choice with their conditioning, right? And so we
Oh,
all get
right.
ingrained and beat down with the conditioning from our parents and society and schools. And how do you get
Can
rid
you
of that?
imagine? Can you imagine? I used to like, imagine my children when they were little, like being in the fifth grade. They're 9 years old, and the teacher is telling them something that they believe is true. Teacher's doing the best they can. They're explaining what they believe is true, and they might even be teaching some kind of scientific thing that is based on a textbook that is 20 years old, and the modern science might actually be an update to that. But the teacher's doing their best, and so the student takes it in. And imagine if an 8-year old or a 6-year old or a 5-year old or a 3-year old had the wherewithal, the emotional, spiritual, physical, intellectual wherewithal to say, "Hey, teacher," or "Hey, mom and dad, I totally appreciate that thing that you're trying to indoctrinate me with is your belief system based on your conditioning from your childhood and your parents' childhood, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm going to go ahead and filter that out and figure that out for myself." Can you imagine if a 5-year old had that wherewithal? Now,
Are you kidding? I'm,
obviously,
I'm trying to imagine if like most 30, 40, 50, and 60-year-olds had that same conditioning, you know? We
right?
just don't.
Well, and it's like because we many people don't really understand the mechanics of that, I'll call it addiction, that conditioning, that indoctrination and belief about not just about this is the way it is, but that this I'm powerless to do anything about it, you know?
Gotcha.
And many people that I've just experienced this so many times that I just have to believe it that once, you know, like AA, for instance, and a lot of recovery programs where they start with, hey, recognize that there's a higher power that might be supportive of you. And this is not a religious conversation for me. This is a spiritual one. Like it's kind of it's kind of a big mysterious universe. And to think that we're all alone in this world just doesn't make any sense to me, or in this universe makes sense to me. And so if you think, okay, I might be powerless. I might have been powerless up till now about what's been put into my nervous system. But now that I'm aware, I can actually partner with the infinite and start making changes. And
Wow.
I've seen so many miracles, Michael, happen. People who now in the cancer world, for instance, we're not talking about spontaneous recoveries, although I that happens. I'm talking about someone making the absolute most of a healing experience and actually coming out of a cancer healing experience better than they were before,
So
more
in the
in tune
case of
with themselves.
cancer, like you're saying with cancer, so you've got the Eastern medicine. I'm not generalizing. Eastern medicine, you've got
Yep.
Western medicine.
Yep.
And if someone's got stage 3, 4 cancer, and they start to change their mind, have you seen people with stage 4 cancers heal
Oh,
themselves or be healed?
well, it's a good question, and I have to be very careful because I mean support so many people in so many different aspects of the healing experience. It's really hard to say like, "Oh, I've seen miraculous recoveries," and I have, but I don't I don't pretend to explain or to understand the details of how that happens. But I do know, and why this is important, why I'm so cautious to make this distinction is because I do know that doing this kind of work, taking the responsibility to change the way I see things or change the way you hold an idea in your heart and mind is so uh, influences who you show up in the experience as without regard to the outcome. And so I've seen families become closer together because of a healing experience. I've
Mm.
seen people write books and share a message with someone regardless of the outcome because they were meant to do that and that their illness didn't stop them from doing that. And so just because I used to say to myself all the time, no matter what happens to my body, my soul will always be perfect. And for me, that was like my mantra to stay focused on who I am, not what's happening in my body. You know, I would still focus on what's happening in my body as far as the healing meditations and things like that. But
Wow.
it feels important. Go ahead.
No, that's I I'm actually just listening to you. I'm starting to get it just a little bit. I've also talked to people who say, a lot of times they connect strong, intense, strong emotions with what they want the outcome to be, and those emotions help seal that deal. Uh,
I
what you're
love
thinking
that.
about that?
Yeah, well, what I like to say is that everything we feel, everything our body, everything we say, like you and I are talking, we're talking about the amazing biomagical properties of our bodies and the healing properties of our immune system and our endocrine system and our pineal gland. And we're talking about all these great things with a certain enthusiasm and faith. Everything we say, our bodies hear, and everything our bodies feel as a result of hearing that, the universe hears. I know this to be true. I just know it. And so if I'm going to put a message out into the universe, this is what I'm going to try to create, attract, or manifest, then, and I meet that desire and clear mental picture with a powerful emotion of accomplishment, of gratitude, of pride, of enthusiasm for not just the outcome of it, but who I get to be in the pursuit of it, then the universe picks up on that, at least in my experience and the experience of people who I've talked to about this. And so that associating and Wallace Waddles talks about this in The Science of Getting Rich, which is a book I love so much I rewrote it for a modern audience. Napoleon Hill talks about it in Speak and Grow Rich, two just powerful new age manifestos for using our minds to create our physical world. Um, this idea of associating, having a clear mental picture and associating with an emotion so that we can act as though it's already done. And in acting so, um, we actually we start to make decisions consistent with that. We start showing up as a person consistent with somebody who would create that. We start attracting other people and collaborating with people who would help us to create that. You know, uh, uh, Earl Nightingale defines success as the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And if we are progressively realizing these things in baby steps, I would like to say quantum leaps are always preceded by baby steps. And if we're doing that and showing up as that person, then we start to see the results of that, and that feeds itself. And so the old expression, fake it till you make it, I don't really buy into that, because I don't see it as faking it. I see it as us showing up authentically as that person and feeling what that feels like, and that feeds the transmission into the universe. So we say, feel it to reveal it.
I like that.
And yeah,
I like that. Fake it, till you make it. I think that's probably what's limiting most people, right? Is you're just faking it, but feel it to reveal it is
I think it takes it deeper or higher, depending on your perspective.
gut for me. It hits different. You
Yeah.
know, one of us froze there for just a second. I, if somebody's coming to you just like right off the bat and they've got some issue they want to clear up themselves, right? Or let me just even talking more general uh, words here. If
Okay.
people listening to us right now go like, man, I really like what George is saying. What's the first thing I got to do to just start believing I reveal it to you, feel it, that sort of stuff? What's the first thing they got to do?
Wow, the very first thing. I think the first thing is an honest look. What's the conversation coming out of your mouth? Tracy and I talk about the three conversations. We call it the conversation coming out of your mouth, the conversation going on in your head, and the conversations going on around you. And if you're really tuned in to any or all of those things, you can tell. Like, oh man, that group I hang out with at lunch every day for the past 10 years, all they do is complain about politics or the administration or the weather or that really weighs on me. That's a great thing to notice. And it's
Yes.
not about like, oh, I automatically have to dump all my friends and hang out with other people. I don't advocate that immediately, just take a look, because when you notice and you know better, you do better. When you notice, you might actually muster the courage to say to your friends, you know what? Can we not talk about politics today? Let's talk about our dreams. That
Yeah.
takes courage, by the way, right? It takes courage to say that
Yes.
to your friends, especially when you've been habituated to having a particular conversation. But
You know,
man alive, watch people change.
that is huge what you just said because I think the biggest thing personally that I've done is probably just turn off the news, right? Because it has gotten to be so negative all the time. And I've noticed that turning it off and watching something else has helped me be more positive about the world.
I think that is such a big piece, Michael, that if that was all someone did, they would notice a difference. First of all, let's be honest. If you need to know, you're gonna find out. Somebody's gonna get it into your brain box that this is going on, right? You don't need to be up on it. I the one of the things is I'm total fan of. I don't have any notifications on my smartphone. I
Really?
know I'll go find it when I need to. The only notifications I leave on are appointments if I want to have my phone remind me. Otherwise, I'll know, you know?
That's a good
And
point.
yeah, I think that, yeah,
Yeah. I've turned off mine, not quite as far as you've gone, but I do the whole do not disturb thing. And I
that's
just have the
great.
people
Great
that I
start.
want to talk to.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
that's amazing. Okay, so people are going to need to want to get in touch with you, and you've got several ways that we can do that. You've got a amazing website here, theextraordinarymanshow.com. They can find you on Facebook and Jumper Cables, and they can also find you on TikTok on Rev GPK. Love that. I'm
Yeah.
gonna leave this one up here so people can just
There's actually, is there, can I share another one?
sure. What do you want to do?
I mean, there's just because we have this thing we call it the thank you body meditation, and it really, like you asked, what's the first thing to do to start changing the language about how we talk to ourselves, and it's not even just about healing, but to start to change the way your relationship with your body, and thank you body.love, I think it is. Thank you
Yeah,
body.love. And it's a
perfect.
free
I love it.
meditation, a download. It's just a mantra you could say to yourself. But I think as something for free to like share with the world, like just look in the mirror and recite this mantra and see if you feel differently. My experience, that's it. My experience is you change the language. Come on, you start changing the words, you'll start feeling it and you'll start feeling a difference. You'll say, just enough, like, "Oh, I noticed I feel differently enough to do it again."
Yeah,
And then you do it again, and you notice it deepens. "Thank you, body. I'm so happy and grateful that every cell, every tissue, every organ, every system functions in perfect synchronicity," and so on and so on. And when you're done reciting that, if you don't feel even a little more connected to your body, I'll have to come back on and convince you
you're
again.
gonna have to come back on. We'll do some more. We'll do some live interviews with people. I will tell you, one of the things that you sent me,
That
I've
would be
started
great.
actually reading, and um, I do feel better. And I've noticed something also. We can talk a little bit more. Just being like in the hospital or being around people who are sick or people who act a certain way almost enforces the behavior of having to be sick. In other words, you go to the doctor, it's like you're sick, you go like, dang it, I gotta like at least act like I'm sick. I'm here now. And I've seen that in me. And have you seen that in other people also?
Yeah, um, again, it's the subtle and conditioned cues that we take, um, that we. I remember one night when I was first hospitalized 18 years ago. I couldn't be interact with people because of my compromised immune system. So I would dress up in my contact precautions and my mask, my PPE, which everybody on
Yeah.
the planet knows what that means now, and uh, my chemo pole and my blood transfusion pole, and I would go wheeling through the hospital at like 2 o'clock in the morning because that was the only time I had to get out of my room, right? And I remember turning the corner and I ran right into one of my attending physicians, like right bumped into her, and all she could see was my eyes and my cheeks, which, of course, again, the whole world knows now with a mask, you can see a lot from somebody's eyes behind a
Yes.
mask, right? And she said, "Mr. Kansas, you look like the healthiest person in this hospital." And I was sick, like I was gray, and but I always had a smile on my face. And there's really something to that. That if we challenge that paradigm, if
Mhm.
we challenge that, if we just ask the question, I can I can actually choose how I respond to this. Like I can listen to my nervous system that tells me act sick or behave a particular way or be defeated or sad or
Mhm.
crestfallen or whatever, or I can choose something else and as an experiment at the very least. And and I think that if people know, I think that most people fall into that because they don't know different. They
Right.
don't know that there's a choice. And it takes practice and it takes discipline and it takes courage for sure.
Yep.
I mean, I'm telling you, Michael, I've sat with people in every stage of healing and not healing and the courage and working with couples. My wife and I, Tracy and I, work with couples who are deepening their relationship and using their relationship to find purpose in the world. It's no different. When we choose different language, we change our relationship with we can change our relationship with anything,
Yeah.
and it starts with the language we use to describe it.
I love it. I'm going to leave it right there because that is a perfect message to end on.
Okay,
Thank you
good.
very much, George. We
Oh,
will definitely have you back again, and I'm staying in
I would
touch with
love
you
that.
personally without a doubt.
Definitely. Thank you, Michael. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you guys. All you guys on YouTube who are seeing this, make sure you subscribe. This is our second show on YouTube. So thank you very much, George. We'll see you in the future, and we out.